Okay, good morning or good afternoon and good evening, everyone. This is Irma Jennings, and I'm so happy that you're all here. Denise, am I being heard? I just want to make sure my voice is coming through.
I can hear you.
All right.
I can hear you.
Okay. So for those of you who do not know me by my name, I'm Irma Jennings, and I'm a certified holistic health coach. And I've been working in the field of bone health using food as the first step solution for over 13 years now, since I was diagnosed with osteopenia in 2005 and given a script for Fosamax and told, go on your very way, and there's nothing more to discuss. And that really started me on my own journey to look for food that I could use for myself to help me and my bones. I have been blogging for years on Food for Healthy Bones and have 60 blog posts on there all about food for healthy bones. So the whole idea about how I came about to do this work was, again, because of my diagnosis and because of my only option, which was given to me with a ton of fear. And that's the one thing that I heard from the participants on our call who answered the questions. There was a lot of fear that was coming through. And I hope to, during this conversation, just bring some peace to that as Dr. McCormick will dive into some of the options that we have. In addition to my Food for Healthy Bones, I was featured with Dr. Lonnie Simpson in PBS's Stronger Bones, Longer Life in the first national PBS special that dealt with the whole aspect of osteoporosis. And I cooked Food for Healthy Bones. And how this whole thing came about is that I have a bones tribe, and that's where we meet all the time. It's on Facebook, and I post weekly recipes. And one of my participants mentioned this book. She said, have you ever heard of this book? And I said, no. And I pretty much read them all. And she said, yeah, it's very interesting. And so that started this whole idea of organizing an online book club. So 25 women got together over a course of 10 weeks, and we broke down each chapter and really dove into the nuances of what Dr. McCormick was teaching us and how we can apply those things. And then that morphed into this moment, which I'm really happy about. We've had over 300 people register for the call. We have, it looks like 126 people on the call right now, and more may be coming in. So, so if you've suffered with osteoporosis or have been diagnosed with osteopenia and find yourself in that fear of, that zone fear, which is what I found myself in, my intention for this evening's webinar is to shed some insights and to provide information so you could speak to your physician from a place of knowledge and empowerment. And I think that that's really cool and really important. And something that may come up tonight, but I have found that if I have a doctor who I'm speaking to and he's not listening to me or won't consider other options, I have to move on. So for our call tonight, this is what I plan to cover. I'm going to introduce Dr. McCormick and ask him to share his personal osteoporosis journey, weaving in the 300 questions from our participants. And one question that somebody asks is often the question that others have and didn't think to ask. We're going to do a review and wrap up, and we're going to end the call at 8:30. So, Dr. McCormick, here's my introduction to you. Is an avid athlete, and we have a lot of athletes on the call tonight. He was competing in Ironman triathlons and was a member of 1976 U.S. Olympic team in the sport of modern pentathlon. In addition to his general practice, Dr. McCormick is a board-certified sports chiropractic physician and is a member of the University of Massachusetts Sports Medicine Department. He earned his bachelor's in human biology at Stanford and his doctorate at National College of Chiropractic. In addition to his chiropractic practice, he is board-certified. He has a board-certified chiropractor. He is board-certified chiropractor in the state of Massachusetts, Colorado, and California, and has been in clinical practice since 1992. His professional memberships include the American Society for Bone and Mineral Research, the International Bone and Mineral Society, and the American Chiropractic Association. Dr. McCormick specializes in nutritional management of patients with bone fragility and is the author, as I mentioned, The Whole Body Approach to Osteoporosis, which is a must-have. You must have that book in your library. It's a good reference point. In 2011, Dr. McCormick founded Osteo Naturals, a company dedicated to providing information and quality nutritional products to individuals with bone loss. This combination, sports physician and athlete, including Dr. McCormick's own personal experience with numerous injuries from years of intensive training, gives him a unique ability to relate to your pain and your treatment plan. So Dr. McCormick, it's great to have you. I can't tell you how excited I am. This has been months in working, so thank you for your time. I know you had a very busy schedule these last couple of days. So when it comes to bones and your work and your dedication, you truly make the invisible visible. And what I mean by that is that you broaden the conversation as far as the tests, as far as nutritional nutrients that we should be looking at, as far as food. And osteoporosis, we know, is a silent disease until it speaks up as a fracture or even something worse. So I'm wondering at this point if you can share your story, which I know we would all love to hear.
Well, 18 years ago, I was just running a track workout, and as you had mentioned, I was on the Olympic team, and just sports have been part of my life forever. And I was at 45 years old, I was still doing track workouts and Ironman competitions, and I was doing track workout, and I got a lot of hip pain, and so things tumbled into other things. I went to orthopedic surgeon and found out I ended up having osteoporosis. So I went to 5 different endocrinologists, and they just, all of them just wanted to give me drugs, just like your story. They just wanted to give you a bisphosphonate. That's what they wanted to give me. The last one, I said, listen, I'm not here to get a drug. I'm here to figure out why I have osteoporosis. And, you know, in our society, most people find out they have osteoporosis when they're 50 because they go to their MD. Their MD says, okay, it's time to get your bone density done. And they find out they have osteoporosis. They're handed a prescription, and then the person looks up in you know, what the adverse effects are. They find out that's osteonecrosis of the jaw, atypical femur fractures, you know, heart issues, esophageal issues. So they get very nervous, and then they go to Amazon, they look at my book, and that's how I get introduced to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But it's the same story over and over. You know, people find out they have osteoporosis, they're given a prescription, and that's it. And if you think of it, it's amazing, because if a person's 50 years old, that means they're going to live for another 30 or 40 or 50 years. So are they supposed to, as in my case, I was 45 when I was diagnosed, was I supposed to just take medications for the next 40 or 50 years? It didn't make any sense to me. And that's what is out there right now. We have two options, the allopathic option, or what I promote. And the allopathic option is you're diagnosed, you are given something to make your bones denser. So just the quantity of bone is looked at. Then to analyze to see if it's working, every 2 years they're given a bone density. And then for the person's overall health, nothing is done.
Right.
On the other hand, what my model is we help that person gain both quality and quantity of bone tissue. Number 2, we see if it's working right, and we see if it's working right through therapeutic targets. And the therapeutic target is not just a bone density every 2 years, but it's monitoring lab work, doing things like looking at inflammatory markers like high sensitive C-reactive proteins. For example, if HSCRP is increased, it increases a person's risk for fracture. So it's a kind of a secondary way to look at bone health. Homocysteine is another inflammatory marker that when homocysteine increases, it also increases if it goes above 15, well, really 8, but it's certainly above 15, then the person's risk for fracture rises substantially. So if we can decrease homocysteine, that helps their bone. There's lots of different biomarkers, bone resorption markers, N-telopeptide, C-telopeptide, deoxypyridinoline, lipid peroxides, all these different lab works. We look at these labs every 4, 5, 6 months, and we see if they're changing. If we're changing, if their N-telopeptide goes from 100 down to 50 with what we're doing, we know that we're doing something proper. So we're monitoring these people and looking at things other than just bone density. And the third thing is making them overall healthier. And the reason why that's so important is because we're not just bones, we're a whole body. And that's why my book is the whole body approach to osteoporosis, because you really do have to look at the whole person's body. Every single thing is related in your body. So if your muscles are weak, you're going to have weaker bones. Your bones are actually endocrine organs, and your bones, people don't realize this, but people think of bones as just being these dead, hard things in your body, and they're not. They're very dynamic. They're very much alive. They're endocrine organs. They're changing constantly. They actually help you regulate your blood glucose. They help you regulate your testosterone production. So there's a lot more to it than most people think. So my motto is doing these three things: changing the health of the bones quantity quality wise, monitoring in a much more sophisticated manner than just doing a bone density every 2 years, and then really looking at improving the whole person's health.
So just to review, the health quality of the bones, both the inner and the outer, I mean, is there a measure yet for the inner part of the bones?
Not quite yet. So that's the problem. That's why most doctors just look at bone density. They're just looking at the quantity of bone that's there. They're not really looking at the quality, because we don't have a really good direct way, except for in the lab, to look at bone quality. But that's why we use lab markers. And lab markers are indirect assays of looking at bone quality. It doesn't mean they're perfect, but bone density isn't perfect either. There's many times when bone density is wrong, and there's many times when lab work is wrong. So we have to step back and look at it from afar and say, okay, I have these 5 tests. What's it telling me?
Mm-hmm.
If one of them's a little bit like it doesn't seem to jive, then get rid of it. But then look at the other 4 and say, wow, is this person improving or are they not? If they're not improving, let's do something else.
So, wow, that's a whole lot. That's a completely different approach than most of us are used to. And I want to get into the DEXA test and those kinds of things. But before we do that, one of the things that you had mentioned in your book is the whole aspect of as you were running through the forest. And I think that this is such a key point, because I think it plays the nuances of how you approach bone health. As you were running through the forests, that you were more or less being mentored by nature. You were really observing all the nooks and crannies and everything that was going on as you were in this contemplative, meditative run that athletes know. Can you just speak a little bit about that and how that aspect is brought into your work?
I think we're all, especially as doctors, we're all kind of taught to look at a person, make a decision, and go from there. Yeah. And oftentimes that decision might not be the correct decision. I was with a friend of mine. He's the best tracker in the east for the United States. His name's Paul Resendes, and he's a great tracker of naturalist of animals. And we were out tracking a bear for a whole day once. And at the end of the day, we tracked this bear, to his den. We tracked it while it was foraging. We tracked it while it was doing everything. And at the end of the day, I said to Paul, I said, I think I know a lot more what it's like to be a bear. And he looked at me and said, don't think, just observe. And the same thing goes with people's labs and people's being, if you are too quick to make an assumption of what's going on, you're going to miss the fine parts. So I really try to sit back and observe what's going on, try not to make decisions yet, and then really just let it soak in. And I mean, as you were saying, you know, when I look at the forest, like a good example is a tree. When they have a lot of leaves on them, and that's their soft tissue, they can pick up a lot of wind when the wind blows. And so they better have good hard trunks, branches. And so the leaves have to talk to the hard parts of the tree, because otherwise it's going to die. And the same thing with a wind's going to come along and it's going to take it down. And the same thing with the body of a person. If they have really strong muscles, they're soft tissues, just like the leaves. If they have strong muscles, those muscles better tell the bones to shore up, to get stronger. Because if they don't, then the person's going to break a bone because their muscles are going to overpower their bones. So lots of little stories like that occur in the forest. And that's why I look at the woods in a certain way, and I translate it into looking at the way people are.
And I've had that personal experience as a patient advocate. I brought a client to you, and I actually heard the way you spoke to her, and it was so respectful and diving more so into the nuances of her own self. And I remember at one point towards the end, you said, and what about the joy? Is joy in your life, which we know is an important factor in this whole process versus fear.
I mean, your adrenal glands are so important as far as the health of everything, your cortisol release and things like that, but also people's sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. A lot of people don't realize that the sympathetic nervous system can release things like, besides stimulating the adrenal glands and releasing cortisol, they can release ATP, ADP, UDP, UTP, these different extracellular nucleotides. And those extracellular nucleotides from an overactive sympathetic nervous system can actually stimulate what's called P receptors, P2 receptors on osteoclasts, and then they can also release them from red blood cells and immune cells. And these extracellular nucleotides can stimulate the production of more osteoclasts that break down more bone. So it's not just just that, oh yes, we should be happy for no reason. I mean, it's, biochemically, there's real reasons for this, and not just adrenal stress, but there's other cytokine factors. Cytokines are just messenger molecules in the body that the kind that increase osteoclastic activity increase when you're stressed out.
Thank you for that. So a couple questions before we get into the osteoclast. You were diagnosed with severe osteoporosis at 45 at -4.3.
Yes.
And now do you still have a...
And the woman at the bone density, the technician said, blurted out, oh my God, you have worse bone density than a 100-year-old woman. And it's like, that wasn't very professional. Right.
and you had been an athlete
forever.
So that whole idea of like, of course my bones must be strong because I've been working out. So you went to get the DEXA test or your bones measured because you were having pain.
I went because I was having a lot of hip pain. And I went to an orthopedic surgeon first, and he took x-rays and he said, wow, these bones look really rare. He was a great orthopedic surgeon. He was just fantastic. And he said, let's get the bone density. This doesn't look good. And which I think most people would have missed. And actually went to one of the best orthopedists in Boston, and he totally did not put together the hip pain and the osteoporosis, whereas this local orthopedist did. And that's how I got to get the first bone density that I had. And I got the bone density, and it was so bad that they didn't believe it. And so they sent me actually the next week to get another one. And it was actually a little bit worse. But so it was very unusual for a 45-year-old and to have that, especially a 45-year-old who had been on the Olympic team, who'd done athletics all his life. I mean, the fifth endocrinologist I went to, the first words out of his mouth is, "Oh, you took drugs." And I said, "No, I never took a drug in my whole life." But he thought that I took steroids and osteoporosis.
Oh, I see, because of the running, right?
Because a lot of athletes take steroids to improve their performance. And so that was his take first thing.
Right.
Been on 7 world championship teams, and he said, "Oh, you're a drug guy," you know.
I see. Oh, so wow, that must have been interesting to hear. So then you did you go on a bisphosphonate?
Initially, I didn't, because I said I don't want to do drugs. I'm a chiropractor. My father was a chiropractor. I never took an aspirin in my life.
What?
I never even actually. Once I drank a third of a beer because I was so thirsty. I was shoeing horses and I forgot my water. And I said to the rancher, I said, "Don't you have any water?" He goes, "No, I got beer." So he gave me a beer, but it was so bad I only drank a third of a beer, and that's all the alcohol. I never smoked, never did anything. So no, I've haven't done anything really to invite this disease.
Right.
But where was I going with this? What were you asking?
I was asking if you went on the bisphosphonate. You were saying that you didn't want to do any kind of drugs.
So so I didn't initially, because I thought I can fix this, but it kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I started fracturing a lot, and I fractured 12 bones in 5 years. And so after about I would say, well, I can't remember, but maybe 3 years or so of trying to figure this out, because I knew nothing about osteoporosis, but I was just breaking too much. So I went on Fosamax for, I think, 5 months. And then I said, "Oh, I don't want to do this. And I can fix this myself." And so I kept trying, and I just kept breaking. And so finally, the endocrinologist I was using, who was just fantastic, he was from Farmington, from University of Yukon, and he was great. He really helped me a lot, and he allowed me to dictate my therapy. You know, and earlier, 10 minutes ago, you were talking about how doctors need to listen to you and make you part of it. It is so important. And this guy was great. But I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about osteoporosis. I didn't know what to do for it. I just kept breaking. So then I went on Forteo for 18 months, and that pulled me out of the hole. And then after the Forteo, I went on bisphosphonates for 6 months, because after doing Forteo, you have to shut down those osteoclasts. And that pulled me out of the hole. That stopped me from breaking. But that was 15 years ago, and now I know what I'm doing, and now I don't need drugs and just do it, you know, but it helped pull me out of this bad situation. So I'm not against drugs. I'm just against the misuse of drugs. And that is what happens all too often. Eating better, taking supplements, exercising, trying to improve emotional health, that's what's going to keep you better.
Right.
Sometimes you have to use emergency medicine, you know, just to get you out of a hole. But then after that, after you get things settled, then you shouldn't have to go back to drugs. I mean, if you do, you do. But, you know, I was able to not have to go that way. So.